So we talked about recognizing the truth. We talk about liberating ourselves from the delusion, which is the opposite of knowing the truth. And we talk about that being the core element of the bodhicitta, and accompanied with that, for the beings like us, we approach to this through fabricating, training, learning, getting accustomed to the culture and the habit of kindness, compassion, and gradually develop the bodhicitta. We can talk about later, we can discuss later about how the mind of wishing to help all sentient beings is connected to understanding the truth. How the word infinite, all sentient beings, is quite crucial to understand to relate to the ultimate truth. But for now, we have been talking about generating the bodhicitta, kind of even with a contriving method, even though some of it, with a ritual. And ritual being solely mind training. It's really the mind training, because it is the mind that needs to be trained. And that is exactly the same with all the yanas. This is just the mind training here is much more elaborate, if you like to say it that way. Okay, so through the mind training of prostrations, confession of the mistakes, and now I would quickly go through this chapter, because this chapter is short and again should be fairly self-explanatory. And then there's quite an important question from Professor Duker. We can dwell on that a little bit. So then the next so what we are trying to do is we are really trying to get accustomed to the wholesome thoughts, kind thoughts. So one way is by rejoicing to the virtue, all kinds of virtue, the virtue of even the ordinary virtue, ordinary merit. When I say ordinary, sometimes it's referred as a stained merit. Like us, people practicing generosity so that aiming for, wealthy life. We have that kind of, more aiming towards a samsaric, worldly gain. More, nothing to do with the liberation, very much to do with samsara. Yet, like doing good things, philanthropic, lot of philanthropic activities could be considered as stained merit or ordinary good deeds. Like giving food, giving shelter, giving education, those virtues we rejoice. Then, of course, the stainless virtue, such as shamatha vipassana, especially the virtue that gears towards the understanding of the truth, the virtue that is not aiming for ordinary attainment such as wealth or long life or power. Of course, those virtues we rejoice. Rejoice is again, these are all a very important mind training. By rejoicing, it's again going against the normal habit of self-cherishing and self-clinging. So obviously, it will create a right condition to arise the bodhicitta. So we then also rejoice the actions and thoughts and qualities of the great sublime beings. That's one way to create the condition to have right kind of thoughts. Then the next is supplicating. One of the reason why the wholesome thoughts are difficult for us to wholesome thoughts are difficult to arise within us normally is the envy and jealousy has become kind of like a second in nature. So as an opposition to the envy and the jealousy, practicing the rejoice. And it's considered one of the most swift and easy way to accumulate the merit. Because you are not spending anything. It's the others, they are doing the great job. And you are just rejoicing. And according to the Tathagatas, many times you accumulate equal amount, or at least half the amount of the merit someone compared to someone who's actually doing it. And then next one is supplicating the sublime beings to remain in the samsara, in the world, for long, meaning requesting them to live long. This is a very Indian thing, I feel. Zindabad. Is it? Do the other cultures have that? I don't know. Live long. Zindabad, right? It's a practice. And it has a specific purpose. Because even though there are impressive paths, such as the shunyata, interdependent arising, all this impressive, logically sound, reasonable, all that, viable, credible path, if we don't have a model, a living being, then often it could be just, as we talked this morning, it would be just an intellectual exercise, and it could even create a depression. It could even make you lose faith to the path, because even though there's this amazing path, if there's no person who is doing that you can refer to, you actually could create a wrong view. A wrong view is one of the hideous defilement that the Mahayana warns again and again, the wrong view. So this morning, as I was talking about Jajja Rinpoche, such a great being. Their strength of their life, their message, be it burning everything what he gets, be it, like a Coca-Cola a day for probably about 100 years, maybe not 150 years. And by the way, he also releases living, like fish and all that. In fact, I think in Calcutta, nobody knows him as Jajal Rinpoche. He's known as Fish Lama. And once there was an incident that all the 5-star hotels, they complained to the local government because he ends up buying all the fish. All the fish. So, not enough fish for the menu in the big hotels. Relentless, big amount, not just one or two. So much. We are talking about really so much. He doesn't have concrete like monasteries or anything like that. When he teaches, there is a tent, which has never been hosted for a long time, anyway. So having that kind of being, very important, I think. And us, or those aspirant of the bodhicitta, or the bodhisattva yana path, to really wishing or requesting for their long life, is just one way to accumulate, create that atmosphere so that the right thought will occur. Anyway, this chapter, the 3rd chapter, is called Embracing the Bodhicitta. Then we actually begin to exercise the bodhicitta. May I become medicine for those who are ailed. May I become nurse for those who requires. May I become food and drink when there is a hunger and thirst. May I become the wealth of treasure when there is a poverty. May I be able to offer my body, my wealth, and even all the merit of the past, present, and the future without any clinging, for the benefit of all sentient beings. I will give my body to the beings. I will let them use my body as however they like. They can slander me, they can tease me, they can criticize me. It is theirs. I shall not defend this. At the same time, if any harm is coming to these beings, I shall try to protect them. And myself, I shall try not to harm them. Those who ever have a connection, be it a profound or just an ordinary connection, like rubbing a shoulder or sitting in the same bus. May their life be fruitful. If anyone gets angry with me, or also if somebody has somebody likes me and have devotion towards me, may they equally fulfill their wishes and gradually reach to the state of enlightenment. May I become the guide for those who are lost. May I become a boat for those who wants to cross across the ocean. May I become a bridge. May I become an island for those who feel lonely or fatigued. May I become a lamp for those who are tormented by darkness. May I become a shelter, slave, wish-fulfilling jewel. May I become a mantra. May I become dharani. May I become medicine. It is supposed, this is a very classic Mahayana. This is for this reason, like mantras such as Om Mani Padme Hum. Supposedly, that the great Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, in his previous lives, he has really aspired to become that mantra. So this is sort of, we are following that, we are emulating that. May I become condition, favorable conditions for those who are seeking the liberation. As how the Tathagatas of the past have generated the bodhicitta, I shall also generate the bodhicitta for the benefit of sentient beings. As all the bodhisattvas of the past have followed the discipline of the bodhisattva, I shall also step by step follow the bodhisattva discipline. Having generated the bodhicitta, I shall also tell myself to rejoice. I shall also encourage myself to rejoice and boost my confidence. I shall think this way. I shall think that today my life has bare fruit. Today, purpose of being born on this earth has finally realized. Today, I become the heir of the Buddha. We were talking about the caste yesterday. Yeah, that's what he is. Today, I become the children of the Buddha. From now on, since I have now become the children of the Buddha, child of the Buddha, I shall follow my Svadharma, caste duty. I should not disgrace my family. Like a blind person, a blind beggar, stumbling over a precious jewel. I, an ignorant being, have found this precious thought. I have found bodhicitta has arisen in me. This bodhicitta that I have found is the answer to defeat the maras. This is the quintessence of all the nectar. This is also the treasury of wealth. to dispel the poverty of beings. This is also the supreme medicine to cure all the disease. This is also the big tree which gives good shade for those who needs rest. This is the grandest vehicle that will take all those who wishes to go to the other shore instantly and swiftly. This is like a moon that cools the heat of emotion. This is like a sun that dispels the darkness of ignorance. Bodhichitta is like a butter as we churn the milk like dharma. This is the quintessence. This is also the big provider that provides to those who need bliss. Okay, and summarizing the chapter is Dāgitiring Chopa Thamjiji. Today, in the presence of the Tathagatas, I have invited all beings as my guest. And to this guest, I have surrendered myself as their servant. So gods and asuras rejoice. I think it's believed that this has a lot of, I'm sure many of Indians are quite familiar with this. The human behavior is supposedly have big influence to the well-being of gods and asuras. So when a human beings behave and especially create this kind of, mindset, this kind of culture, this kind of, atmosphere, obviously it seems to create good condition for gods and asuras. So this is the third chapter. Okay, so should we begin with a question? Do you want to ask? Professor Diokar had a question earlier. And then there was another question somewhere here. Yes, Suresh, and earlier there was somebody. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. My question is not straight away connected with the discussion now, but it's related to the entire consciousness. We discussed and that Shravakayana mode of practice is kind of considered to be a practice given to those who have not sort of developed their mind so much, and they consider this world as a kind of a moral reality of this. Whereas Mahayana teaching is for the beings who are like them, whose mind are highly developed, and like Shravakayana is more like a primary level of teachings. Then my question is, then why don't the Mahayana tradition first train themselves in the Shravakayana and then go for the further studies, like we do in schools, first primary studies and then go for the higher level studies? Yeah, that's
very good. Okay, related to this, and I will answer this question also, I will try.
Second one first?
Yes.
Okay. And my second question was related to the method which we discussed in the morning. So if we are looking for the reality and trying to know what is the ultimate reality, but the means which we are using are illusory. So how can through illusion, or through illusory means, we can reach the ultimate or the reality?
Okay. Okay, for the first question, this is very complex. Actually, the dichotomy and, I don't know, the discussions between Śarvakayana and the Mahayana continues. First, I want to say, you will always find, as a human being, very gentle, at times a little bit aggressive tug of war. Never like there has been a gun fight or a, sword fighting between, these schools, but especially, intellectually, and many times it's actually even good, even really, it's actually quite refreshing and it's quite academically or intellectually quite satisfying, the debate that went on. But I have to say, there has been always, there's on one hand, there's a Mahayana sort of elitist attitude, chauvinism. And then there's a Śarvakayana's, I don't know, sort of a slightly sort of puritanical kind of attitude. And then came along the Vajrayana, who also has the very, again, a kind of elite, very elite and exclusivist, like very, they have a certain attitude. So, on the academic and intellectual world, there has been a lot of debate. Even till today, if you go to Oxford University, I'm so sure Professor Dewker knows here, if you talk to someone like Professor Gombrich of Oxford, he just cannot accept Nagarjuna is a Buddhist even. And, the Shunyata, Prajanaparamita Sutra, he literally says it's all blah, blah, blah. It's all, it's got nothing to do with Buddhism. He has a point there, before we come to a conclusion. Of course, Vajrayana, that's like too much. It's not even, point of a discussion. That one is like completely corrupted by some, many of them, they think some, Advaita, Tantric, Kashmiri Shaivism mixed up with this and that. So there's that. And we also, traditionally, there has always been a debate. Even in the Bodhicaryāvatāra, on the 9th chapter, there is a few words mentioned about this. And there are many, many other texts where you can actually study systematically the arguments. I want to just throw that into you first. Then what I want to throw in few, I need to give you few things here first before I answer you. There's some, okay. Śarvakayana, such as the Theravada tradition, have no burden to prove that they, let's say there is a Śarvakayana, Theravadan, and a Mahayana. The Theravadan doesn't have to prove that their teaching is Buddha's teaching to this Mahayana person. He doesn't have to. Mahayana gladly, with a veneration, accepts the Theravada teaching as the teachings of the Buddha. But on the other hand, Mahayana people have the burden to prove to the Theravadan that his teaching is from the Buddha. Now imagine, for the Tantric people, they have two burdens. First, they have to prove that it is the teaching of the Buddha to the Mahayana people. And then also the Theravadins. So there's that. I just want to put you into that one. I want to put you. Then I want to blame all you Indians. Indians seems to have this, those days considered very right thing to do, but a habit of never writing it down. Am I correct to say this? Like Upanishad, like no dates, Indians should have learned from Egyptians or Chinese, carved on a stone, if actually, so from this point of view, even the Theravadin would suffer if you really, really, analyze even the birthdays of the Buddha. Oh, it's very dodgy. Because the Indians have never done a good job. I think, this is my, Indians, I understand this. This, by the way, I don't know whether you know this, this is still happening in the Tibetan tradition, because the Tibetans have learned, just like how you Indians have learned from the British, the bureaucracy and all of that. Tibetans have learned a lot of things from the Indian, and one of them is this. We were so much encouraged to listen and repeat and learn by heart. Anyone jotting it down, those days there was no tape recorder anyway, but writing it down and keeping it on the book is considered like lazy and so degenerated. He said, what's the point of writing it down and keeping it on the book? It's not going to work on your mind. So you understand where it is coming from? Indian has this habit of never writing it down. So even the Theravada, I would say, to the certain extent, will suffer if you really, an anthropologist, drills and, grill the Buddhist, whoever, have a little bit of hard time, I would say. There's a dispute between how long Buddha lived, where did Buddha go, because then there's all that, like magical stuff also. For instance, if you go to Burma, a staunch Theravadan country, there's a statue called Mahamuni. It's supposedly touched by the Buddha. Do we have a proof that Buddha ever went to Burma? I mean, on a sort of scientific level? Of course. On the devotional level, everywhere. There's even in the Mahayana Sutra, he put his right feet on Tajikistan and gave a prophecy and so on and so forth. So there's all that bit, all that, sort of supernatural bit, which does not help to the modern mind. You can't use that as to prove anything. It's all in your mind. So I'm just half joking and half serious. I'm blaming you Indians, this one, a little bit. So now, go back to the Sarvakayana, or the Theravada, which is part of the Sarvakayana, and Mahayana. Now, actually, Mahayana does not deny any of the Sarvakayana's path and the view. It is accepted and it is used and it is, for instance, like even today, if you go to a Tibetan monastery, there you will see monks. If you ask where the Vinaya comes from, where is this Vinaya rooted? It is Sarvakayana. There is no Mahayana Vinaya. You know what I mean? There is no Mahayana Vinaya. So Mahayana's basic training are all like a Sarvakayana. Shamatha. But Mahayana will always add the Mahayana, contribution, because Mahayana's view, between these two, it is the view that the main thing is the view. So, let me give you an example. Okay, if you listen to a Theravadan or a Charvaka, let's say, talk about renunciation. A monk should not, do this. There's about 250 of them. Anyway, which will come, by the way, and which might raise some question also. How the monks, we are talking about monk, gender men, okay? So they meditate upon how women's body is dirty, pus, blood, you wrinkle, all the smelly, blah, 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 all of that. And how women's, will allure you, it will, all that. Okay, this is a Sharvakayana monk. Okay, now, majority, the attitude is more like, it's a temptation, it is not a right thing to do, this will lead me to more deeper trouble, let's not get into this, let's get the hell out of this, let's make myself kind of unpresentable, let's shave my eyebrow, let's shave my, beard, let's shave my hair, let's make myself, all that comes from there, you understand? But there is also a little bit of shunyata, always. Now, from the Mahayana monk, it's slightly different. There is all of that, but the main thing is, we should renounce not because what we are renouncing is something evil and something dirty and something, really evil incarnate. Because there is no such thing as evil. There is no beautiful woman. There is no ugly woman. There is nothing. In fact, there is nothing to renounce. That kind of attitude. So that, from the Mahayana point of view, this is the much, much grander, renunciation. There's a very beautiful story about Manjushri and encountering a monk who is supposedly good at this kind of what we call ugliness meditation. And he was so good at it, and then Manjushri approached him and make himself a beautiful girl and allured him, and he was beginning to lose his concentration. And then Manjushri taught him, beauty, ugly, all of this does not exist. This is what you need to know. Because until you know that, as long as there is, somebody, as long as there's ugly or beauty, both will bind you. Both are concept. In this tradition, you hear all these Mahayana stories, like Zen monks who carried a monk, two Zen monks, one younger monk or an older monk carried a woman on his back, and the younger monk complained later, you shouldn't have done that. And then the older monk said, are you still thinking of that? In this, connected to that, similar to that, there is also the tantric stories. There is, I think it is Krishnapa, one of the great 8 Mahasiddhas. He practices Vajrayogini. It's a tantric female deity. And think I've forgotten some of the elements of this particular story. I will tell you another one. This is not Krishna, but this is actually a Sakyapa master. Sakya is one of the Tibetan school. They also practice the same Vajrayogini. And this happened in Bauddha, Kathmandu Stupa. He was practicing. He's really very devoted to the Vajrayogini. This is a female deity. And by the way, the whole deity is another phenomenon, so let's not go in there. But he's a devout Vajrayogini practitioner. He's a monk. He was a monk. Very, very, very respected monk. Vinaya, all intact. And once he was going round the stupa in the crowd, this beautiful girl came, striding towards him and said, "Okay, hug me, kiss me," like that. And he said, he just escaped. This is, like, what, so embarrassing and, disgrace in the public and all of that. He basically ran away. But as he ran, all the shops, I'm sure you remember some of those who have been to Bauddha, there's all these shops surrounding the stupas. Behind the shop, the woman's face, as big as sky, slowly like a moon rising, rose her face, beautiful. And then he realized it was Vajrayogini. And then he knelt down, he basically broke down and cried and said, for all these years I have been, trying to communicate with you, and you don't even give one single sign. And today when you finally give me a sign, you give me a sign this way, like not a proper way. So, but anyway, she said, so he told her that, "Please take me to Kechari, land of the Vajrayogini." And she said, because of that doubt, because of that inhibition in this life, you will never unite with me. But as soon as your last breath, you breath the last breath, breathing, I will. She poetically, it's beautiful sort of, she said, I shall put a ladder made out of coral, because she's red. So I shall put a ladder, a coral-made ladder, and at that time, without any inhibition, you should just climb this ladder. So such is the story. Okay, so anyway, I was talking about the renunciation. So this is how it is different. Okay, now, one. First, let me tell you all this. And then, then when Buddha, Shakyamuni, the Prince Siddhartha, who became the Buddha, when he went to Saranath and taught the Four Noble Truths, samsara is suffering, know the suffering, cause of the suffering is emotion, etc., etc. It is from the Tantric and the Mahayana people also. They say that it is not only the 5 monks, 5 ascetics, they are listening to these teachings. There are many. Especially Tantric, they say there are many great Vidyadharas listening. But they all hear it different. For the Tantric people, when Buddha said, samsara is suffering, they hear it, samsara is bliss. When Buddha said, emotion is pain, and the cause of emotion is the cause of the suffering, they hear emotion is wisdom. Okay. Now, as okay, historically and all of that, it is almost, that debate will continue forever, I think. But there's also a lot of, reconciliation and mutual dialogue and all of that too, I should say. Now, someone like, they always say, which is very true, in the Vajrayana, they practice all three of them together, Sharvakayana, Mahayana, and the Vajrayana. And that is supposedly the ideal way of practicing. Outerly Sharvakayana, we always say, innerly Mahayana, and secretly Vajrayana. That's how you have to practice. The debate will continue. Mahayana, there are many books you can read. Mahayana and the Vajrayana also have lot of argument and counter-argument how their teaching is Buddha's teaching. Mainly because no Vajrayana or no Mahayana says a compounded thing is impermanent. A compounded thing is permanent. They accept that. No Vajrayana or Mahayana would say defiled emotion is, pain. They will not counter that. So all things like, impermanence, dukkha, the suffering, the inherently non-existent, all of these are equally accepted. Equally accepted by the Mahayana and the Sharvakayana. Also, this is another thing. There's many reply to this. A Mahayana or the Vajrayana would ask a Theravadan master, as a Buddhist, as a follower of the Buddha, would you not agree that the Buddha has incredible omniscience and omnipotent? That he will not limit his teachings only one style, one way. And Theravadan have to accept that. Because even in the Theravadan sutras, Pali sutras, there are so many mention of how Buddha taught and how his teaching differs. And there's so many incredible amount of different ways of teaching. So that is already opening the door of Mahayana and the Vajrayana and all of that. And except from some of these newly emerging Buddhist schools like Soko Gakkai, is it? Or there are many, one or two, mainly from I think in Japan are few, and I don't know here. Except those, the existing Mahayana and the Vajrayana has a long history. It is not newly emerged. Somebody made up, It has a 2,000 years of history. And it has a history, it has an impact on nations, big nations such as China. The Chinese Buddhism is a Mahayana Buddhism. So it's going to be difficult to, counter that. You can't just dismiss it that easily because those Chinese were not idiots. Those guys were also great thinker. If not for Xuanzang, where is Bodhgaya even? They really put their heart and mind and blood and sweat into Buddha Dharma. But, okay, I thought this is important that I present here. Okay, so your second question about imaginary thing. Now this, as I was saying during the teaching, is really the mind training. As I said this morning, path is an illusion. Especially this is a Mahayana's way of thinking. Path is basically an illusion. And everything is an illusion. Path is an illusion. So this actually, this illusory nature should be, we should take advantage of that. Because everything is an illusion, our path should not be limited. Even the so-called reality that we can think of at the moment is just in our mind. So, yes, Mahayana would say, yes, a Theravadan would say, well, doing actually, like refraining from eating after midday, that is actually doing something concrete. That actually is more concrete, more tangible. Whereas visualizing a bathtub, bathhouse with what? Garland of pearls and the water coming from here and there and the incense, that we just made it up. Yes, that's the discussion, isn't it, here? The Mahayana would say, if you have the right motivation, both equally can obtain the merit. Because one is training your body, and the other one is training your mind. And after all, mind training is much more important. And from the negative point of view, yes, if you don't have the right motivation, you may not even have those imagination. And if you don't have the right motivation, many so-called discipline, like a monk's discipline, like being, like all this Vinaya discipline, in fact can just create more pride and prejudice and look down at those who are immoral or, So it's really the attitude, it's the view. So this is why you will see, like the Theravadan, much more strict with their basic discipline, much more tangible. Probably you will see in the Theravadan countries, like if there's a monk inside the elevator, the Burmese girls might not have a ride in the same elevator, because that's not right. Whereas now if you go to Mahayana, these are much more relaxed. And if you go to the tantric place, you can almost see semi-pornographic, icons, which shocks the world, I think, which they shouldn't display, actually. You remember the Vajrayana is supposedly taken to be practiced secretly. Okay, let's take a break here.